All right, NFL power rankings coming out of week 5. Somehow, we're already through week 5. 5. So, running through 32, up to 1. Starting at number 32. Guess. It's the Carolina Panthers. Could probably put the New England Patriots here, and honestly maybe should put the New England Patriots here, but Carolina, rip Dennis Green, but they are who we thought they were. And Chicago didn't let them off the hook as the Bears whooped that ass on Sunday and just kind of reminded us that, yes, it is lovely that Andy Dalton came in and made this look like a real football team against the Raiders and against the Bengals, but against any defense worth anything, not going to go great. And it didn't on Sunday against the Chicago Bears. This is still a very flawed football team, and the Andy Dalton effect, I think, probably wearing off very, very quickly. And we will see how things go for this team going forward. But it does kind of make you think now about where they view Bryce Young. Because if you legitimately wanted this kid to develop, and if you legitimately wanted this kid to do well, wouldn't you put him in against the Raiders? I get they have like the Max Crosby pass rush and all of that, but like the Raiders and Bengals are actually a bit of a soft landing spot. Not that it mattered. Like I'm not saying that this kid played really well and the benching was undeserved in any way, shape, or form. But I do think that if you wanted to really try to get this kid right, when you were looking at the schedule, coming off of games against the Chargers and the Saints, who we all thought coming into the season were going to have good defenses, and then you go up against the Raiders, wouldn't you want him to try to work that out? And so instead of giving Andy Dalton the nice soft landing spot, maybe you should have given that to your kid? Who's to say? And then the one game they do throw him out there in is the one where Andy Dalton is getting just pistol whipped by the Bears and is getting thrown all over the place. So yeah, let's throw the kid in for that game. Kind of seems like they want him to fail at this point, right? Like it seems like they're over it, is where I am at right now. On to number 31, the New England Patriots. And they are making the move this week to go with Drake May at the quarterback position. I still think that is a mistake. And I do understand the real life aspect of this decision. And it's not necessarily one I have an explanation against or defense against. If you are in that locker room and you are saying every single week, no, look guys, like I know, clear eyes, full heart speech time. I know what the outside world is saying about us, but we beat the Bengals in week 1. We can do this. We can get this back. We are still the Patriot way lives on. That's why OJ Mayo, can't you tell, is here to lead the charge and guide this football team into the future. Sure, we have lost a lot of games by a lot of points, but we are actively trying to still win, and we can still do this. So anyway, Jacoby Brissett's going to start again. Like you can't, right? And so while it is very easy from 300 feet away to look down on this situation and be like, y'all are insane for throwing your rookie quarterback in behind an offensive line that can't stop a nosebleed. At the same time, you are also trying to not lose an entire locker room of human beings who are going out there and getting into literal figurative car crashes on a week in, week out basis and putting their bodies on the line for you and then not putting what is probably your best quarterback out there. So I do understand it from that level. This feels like throwing him to the wolves and putting him in a bad situation. And we literally just talked about the Carolina situation and how that has scarred Bryce Young and put him in a very bad spot. So I think that there is a real danger with this sort of a thing, but it makes me significantly more intrigued for a matchup between the New England Patriots and the Houston Texans coming up this week. Coming in at 30, it is the Cleveland Browns. It's over. It's done. It feels like the team has quit, to be completely frank with you. Like Deshaun Watson is so very clearly not it. And the offensive line is really banged up, but you have talented players who are being wasted on this team. And it is obviously a very helpless feeling when you have the most expensive quarterback in terms of guaranteed money in the history of the sport who is on your team and you can't do a damn thing about it. It's tough. It's really, really tough to know where they are going to go from here. If we were looking at a long-term power ranking, I think Cleveland is 50th. They're behind the CFL teams right now. It's real bad out in Cleveland, both now and in the long term. At 29, it's Miami. We can no longer, the weapons and Michael McDonough, blah, 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 blah. This team is playing just horrendously on offense. And Tyler Huntley, the Pro Bowler, Tyler Huntley, is not doing anything to change any of that. It has been absolutely just awful. And now they have a bye week, so maybe a week closer to Tua coming back potentially, and that leads to a whole other discussion about whether he should or not, but it's ugly there. And so until proven very aggressively otherwise, we are going to view this as a bad football team. Speaking of, at 28, it is the Vegas Raiders, as they are potentially making a quarterback change this week, with Aiden O'Connell coming in as competition for Gardner Minshew. And yes, the Las Vegas Raiders had a good win a couple of weeks ago and surprised many with a victory over the Cleveland Browns. But that was an embarrassing showing against the Denver Broncos. And things were going well for the Raiders in that game, and then Gardner Minshew throws a pick six, and it all just went to hell. And again, for a team and for a coach in Antonio Pierce, who preaches toughness and the vibes and all of those things, it is concerning when at the first bit of resistance, it crumbles. And this is now the second time where that's happened, right? Because against Carolina, there was pushback and they're just like, yeah, no, we're good, man. And there was the comeback win against Baltimore, and that's fantastic. But we are now seeing more cases than not that this team does not handle adversity very well. And those type of intangible things are supposed to be what Antonio Pierce is bringing, because it's not the phenomenal in-game acumen. And now, going up against the Steelers this week, you're doing a quarterback competition, which by design means you are splitting the snaps in practice this week. So you are giving whoever the starting quarterback is half of the reps to get ready for probably the best or second best defense in the National Football League. Seems like a bad idea. And that's how things are going with the Raiders. At 27, it's Chicago. Things look like they are turning around a little bit, which is a funny thing to say about a team that I've put in the bottom 10 in the National Football League. But Caleb is starting to make a few more throws. He's getting a little bit more comfortable. He's getting a bit more time and starting to do a couple of things. This defense looks legitimate. The results haven't been there as much. They beat Carolina this week. We are not going to be throwing parades when you beat Carolina, but it's at least something, and at least it is some progress and something to look for. Now he gets a national spotlight, albeit very early in the morning, against the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up in England. At 26, the Tennessee Titans, they had the bye this week. We will see what they do, whether it is Mason Rudolph or the lesser option, which is a terrifying thing to say when you're talking about your potential franchise quarterback in Will Levis. But it hasn't worked the way that I thought it would this year. They were one of my teams that I was like, I think we're underestimating this team a little bit. The problem is there's actually a lot that is going right on this team. It is literally just the quarterback who is coming to the sidelines. I didn't see him at all, which is, a nice lesson to, if nothing, I mean, A, see him, but B, let's watch the lip reading here. There's a reason why coaches come out and God, I have a lot of just open notebooks here. But there's a reason that coaches come out and they just do the this and all of that. So that even if maybe they aren't giving away the play or anything like that, you can't see them call the other guy a fucking moron. So, you have that. So veteran savvy needs to be improved upon with old Will Levis there. But this is a talented football team. And if they can get the quarterback spot figured out, which again is not Mason Rudolph either, I still think there is something there, but for now, it's just not. At 25, it's the LA Rams. The thing you can say about the Rams is they play hard. They are going to battle as much as they can to stay in every game. they just have a significant talent deficiency in almost every matchup that they have, given the injuries that they are dealing with and the retirement of Aaron Donald. So credit to them for battling as much as they have, but it's not a good football team. At 24, the Denver Broncos. A lot of people saying, hey, maybe Bo Nix has figured some stuff out, and it's looked better in the last couple of weeks. Again, I will caution, it looked good for Andy Dalton against the Raiders, and then he played a real defense, and it didn't look good all of a sudden. Bo Nix, it looked good against the Raiders, and to be fair, it looked good the week prior for Bo Nix as well when they were playing. God, they are higher up in the standings than I thought, trying to very quickly click on them in the thing. There we go. They're 3-2. That is wild to me. We talk about the games every week. And I didn't know they were 3-2. But like you talk about, okay, well, looking a little bit better against Tampa Bay. And then they survived the bad weather game against the Jets and then looked a little bit better against the Raiders. But I do think that this game against the Chargers will be a nice reminder that it hasn't come that far just yet. But this defense looks legitimately pretty good. And there are a couple of things you can get excited about for Denver, just down the line. Although, again, 3-2 is wild to me. At 23, it's the Giants. I don't think this is a good football team, and if we were to stack up talent, I think this team would be below the Rams, the Titans, and probably Chicago, even certainly Chicago. There is no aspect of the Giants game that is better than what Chicago has on defense. So if we were just doing talent ratings, yeah, the Giants are way the fuck back. But credit where credit is due, that's a real win against the Seattle Seahawks. And it looks like they got a little something in this Tracy kid at running back. Daniel Jones at least was able to complete a few passes and move the football, and Brian Daboll had a really good game plan. They are obviously a well-coached team, and this is one of the things I'm going to start focusing on with the Giants. If this season doesn't go well, which is to say, if it goes the way people expect it to, there already you would hear, and I listen to a lot of New York media, so maybe I'm just a little bit more focused on that part of it, but you're already hearing, at least from some fans or whatever, that, yeah, you know what, after this year, clean full house, get everyone out of there. It's like, no. Like, look, I get they let Saquon go, and some of the Hard Knock stuff didn't inspire a ton of confidence, but I think Brian Daboll is legitimately a very, very good, at least offensive mind, and I think probably a pretty good football coach. He got this team to the playoffs a couple of years ago. Like, fucking come on. Even with a bad schedule, or good schedule, depending on how you want to look at it, that should not be happening with this football team. So they, I think, would be making a big mistake if Brian Daboll was to be let go. I think that this is a great coach. And like, looking at it from the Raider fan perspective here, if y'all let that guy go, picking him up tomorrow. At 22, it is Jacksonville. They finally get the win, and I probably have them a little bit too high coming off of that win. Actually, I definitely have them a little bit too high. I think a little bit of it is still my perception of this team from the start of the regular season, and they are not that. This defense that I thought was supposed to be a strong point just gave up 34 to the Indianapolis Colts. This is going to be a very tricky test for them. They have the advantage because they know how to handle all the London stuff. They've been doing it for years. They have a good grasp on how to do this. But I am very worried about what this offense is going to look like against that Chicago defense. And this defense for Jacksonville that is supposed to be, I think, probably a strength of this group, just simply hasn't been in a number of games for them. And so I wonder how they're going to respond to this. At 21, it's the Colts. So a little weird that I have Jacksonville behind Indy, even though, you know, that game was wild and Jacksonville gets the win. But with Joe Flacco, this team has put up back-to-back pretty good offensive performances. And that makes it 3 out of 5 where the offense has been rolling. I still have questions about this defense. See 37 points to Jacksonville. But this is still a team that I think when everything clicks offensively, there's a few pieces that actually make it work. I will admit, they are a team that I have, like, these two are teams that I have a real difficult time putting my finger on in terms of what are you? Are you a bad team? I don't think you're a good team. Are you an average team? And I think that is where some of the talk we had from the other day, talking about like how the league has gone to shit, I think has these two teams fall into that, because I watch them play football and I'm like, you are below average football teams. But then, like, you look at it and, like, you put them at the bottom, and it's like, well, no, they're ahead of them, and no, they're ahead of them, and no, they're ahead of them. And you start to work up, and all of a sudden, we're, like, they're in the 20s still in the power rankings, but the high or low 20s, depending on how you want to look at that. And so we're getting close to mid territory. And it's just, that is more the mid sinking back down than them raising up, if that makes sense. At 20, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. You simply can't lose that game to Baltimore. I don't think we focused on that enough on the Monday recap. That is a really bad loss to the Baltimore Ravens, where you have the ball after a fumble, and this is a players not plays sort of a situation. What is the strength of the Cincinnati Bengals? Say it with me, passing. Burrow, Chase, Higgins was going in that game. Ioshavas is exclusively open in end zones, but you have a passing attack that gets you going. And I understand Burrow threw a very key interception in that game that cost them a field goal, but the strength of this team isn't running the football. Also, where is Baltimore? Kind of vulnerable. Pass defense. And so to run the ball 3 times into the offensive line and then go for a 55-yard field goal with a new holder is a decision that I should have made more of a note of on Monday. It's really bad football. And the Bengals have been playing some really bad football this year. And I have some faith in the coaching staff, but the defensive talent on this team has not stepped up in any form or fashion. And they're running out of runway very quickly to be taken seriously in the AFC this year. At 19, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They get a tough loss on Thursday Night Football against the Atlanta Falcons. I think we are seeing that this defense is vulnerable. I was going to say to higher powered offenses, but it was also vulnerable against Denver. So who's to say? But this is one of those teams where it is a very inconsistent group. They look very good against the Philadelphia Eagles, and they look very bad defensively against, and just overall against Denver, and defensively against Atlanta. So it's a group that it is tough to kind of put your finger on what they are. At 18, it's the Chargers. We are fairly certain that this defense is good. That this is still one of those, like, you know how we do in the preseason where it is, what am I worried that I'm wrong about? This Chargers team is still like a 5% I'm worried I'm wrong about them, because in my mind, as Chris Harris calls it on the Harris Football Podcast, the fantasy football podcast, which is great, by the way. He was a guest on this show when we first started, and was actually incredibly helpful in me starting this whole thing after I got, from 960. But in my mind palace, as he says, I view this as a strong defensive team that has a pretty good run game and a pass game that's for the shits. And Herbert is limping after every play in every game, and they have a couple pass catching options that would be number 3 options on really good offenses, but happen to be in this spot, so they certainly exist. And the real good defense thing is all fine and dandy until they've played the Raiders, the Panthers, the Steelers, and the Chiefs. Now, holding the Chiefs to 17 points, as we have seen, I know things have gone south for the Chiefs offensively, but there is still, I think, a good offensive team, and it's Patrick Mahomes, right? So holding Mahomes to 17 points is good, I think. But still, I don't think you've proven anything when the offenses you have played are the Steelers, the Raiders, and the Carolina Panthers. So there is still something in me that it's like, I don't know if I should be believing in this team as much as I am. At 17, it's the New York Jets. Talked about them a lot on yesterday's show. Don't need to go too much in depth on it. They are facing a very important test in the next little bit, and we will see how they handle things with a new head coach. At 16, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tough loss on Sunday night. I think it does kind of show that there are limitations with this football team, that offensively, we got excited about Fields for a week, but the weapons, the play calling, and all of that maybe do not lend itself to being a juggernaut for fantasy football or anything like that. But this defense is legitimately good, and it's banged up right now, and they're still only giving up 20 points to Dallas. So they are right in the middle. Speaking of which, Dallas at 15. Again, banged up on defense, now a little bit banged up on offense. Seems like they're making the right move in going with Rico Dowdle at running back, but they are just one of those teams that we talked about where it's just like, yeah, mid right now. At 14, it's Seattle. And this is one coming off of a loss against the Giants. Maybe I could have bumped them down a little bit more, but this is another thing where we're talking about, can I, in all good conscience, put Seattle below. Like, if you were just to walk up to someone on the street and be like, hey, Seattle, top half team in the league right now. I do think that there would maybe be a little bit of pushback. Like 14 does seem maybe a touch high, given how not impressive they have looked in most games this season. But again, who are you putting ahead of them right now? Dallas? No. Pittsburgh? No. Jets? No. Chargers? No. Tampa Bay? No. Like, there isn't an obvious, oh, this team is better than Seattle right now in the ones that we just talked about. So this is, again, where everything has just gotten a beat worse. And so our perception of teams needs to change. But Seattle, they do have some injuries on defense. It is concerning how easy it is to pass on this team right now, when I do think that this should be a strength of this team, is this defense. Offensively, it's weird. Like, it'll look good, and it's, oh, that one just missed. Oh, that just missed. Oh, it feels like they're right there. And then they're down by 10 in the fourth quarter, and they have 13 points. You know? This looked better than that. So they are one where it's almost better to just not watch the game, because watching it, I think, gives you a bit of a false sense that things are going a little bit better than it actually is. At 13, it's San Francisco. I know that I predicted a bit of the demise with the 49ers this year in the season preview, saying that there was no way, like, they got so much injury luck last year. There was no way that last year was going to happen again this year. And now the concerning thing is a couple of division losses where you had significant leads and lost them. And this last week, you can't really do the, oh, well, everyone's hurt. Like, yes, CMC is hurt. Mason's been fine. And they are still unable to put these games away, even when Debo is back, even when Ayuk is in there, even when Kittle is back. You still are having those problems, and so there is some concern. But I can't put one of the most talented teams in the league any lower than 13 right now. I can put them behind Arizona at 12, coming off of that win. And it didn't look good in the first half, to be fair. But Kyler Murray was able to turn it on, take advantage of a tough situation for the 49ers, and be able to put up some points. This offense, I don't think is going to be the juggernaut that maybe I think it was at different points. Like, there have been a few times, oh man, Arizona, watch out, here they come. And then, oh, Kyler had 175 yards and Harrison had a couple of catches and they only put up 20 points. Oh, well, that defense did a good job. So, at some point, maybe I need to be downgrading Arizona a little bit in my mind. Because again, I have the perception of this team that it is kind of offensive juggernaut-y. And so far this season, point totals, 34, great against Buffalo. I think we've seen that Buffalo defense isn't great. 41 against the Rams. That one's legitimately good, because the Rams have at least done an okay job of hanging around in some games. But then 13 against the Lions, 14 against Washington, and now 24 against the 49ers. So I think that our view, or my view anyway, that this Arizona offense is this unstoppable machine might be a little bit inaccurate. At number 11, New Orleans. Now, this one I think will drop significantly with the injury news around Derek Carr, but this defense is legitimately good. And look, they had the football with a chance to win in the last few minutes against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think a lot would argue that no, they didn't. Like, they had the football, but they didn't have a chance to win because Spags knows how to deal with Derek Carr, and whoever that backup kid is, it's not going to go great. But this is a team that is better than I thought they were going to be. And it's not the offensive powerhouse we thought it was we saw a couple of weeks ago, but it is at least taken a bit of a step forward here. At 10, it is the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins with a phenomenal primetime performance, which you've never been able to say about him. The defense did get kind of picked on a little bit against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I think you are seeing that some of these weapons that they have are pretty legitimate, and Kirk Cousins is able to spread the ball around to them. And the one thing I was concerned about, and it's coming true, is he is looking better as the season goes on. And I was very skeptical of that. Like, oh, the 36-year-old is going to look better as the season goes on. Well, it is. And I think we are seeing the effects of barely playing in preseason, and also how much time you need to recover from these sorts of injuries. So it's getting better out in Atlanta. At 9, Philadelphia. They are getting A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith back, so I am feeling a bit more confident that this team will put it together. But this team, I don't think anyone has the pressure that the Philadelphia Eagles have on them this week. The excuses, like I said, are probably gone because those guys are coming back, and they are facing the Cleveland Browns, who are a bad football team, as previously discussed. Their next 3 games: home Browns, at Giants, at Bengals. That closes out October. That has to be 0-3. Or sorry, 3-0. Any loss to any of those teams, and I think it is a bit of a panicky thing. Maybe we can even just limit it down to 2 because, at Cincinnati, that can be a bit of a tricky game, at least. And if you win the first 2 there, then maybe there's a bit of a pause. But I think it's still a nice kind of seeding game almost for where do we think this team is. Beating the Browns and beating the Giants just proves that it's not a disaster this season. And then beating the Bengals would show that, okay, that this is at least a team that we can put into the good football team category, like the talk we had the other day about Washington Commanders opposition. At 8, it's the Buffalo Bills, certainly not the juggernaut we thought they were a couple of weeks ago, and Josh Allen only completing 9 passes in a game certainly is a lot lower than the floor we thought he had coming into the season. But I still think with Shakir back, which is not something I anticipated this year, that, this is obviously the man who stirs the drink with this team in the regular season. So how could you how could you not know that? But I think that this is still a good football team. Maybe not a great football team, and one that has significant holes on the defensive side, and one that, when faced with a decent defense, isn't going to be able to put up the monstrous numbers we saw, but can still take advantage of certain situations. At 7, it's the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love didn't look perfect against the LA Rams. You would have liked for it to be maybe a little bit more convincing. We'll see what happens with Christian Watson back, if he is back, or maybe even with Romeo Doubs, as he looks to work his way back from a suspension after he was just like, yeah, I don't feel like going to practice today because I'm not getting the football enough. But I still like the offensive weapons there. The defense hasn't taken the full step forward that you would like. Xavier McKinney is getting interceptions in every game, and that's sweet, but it's still not what you would consider a good defense. It's better than last year, but I don't think it's what you would consider a good defense. At 6, it's the Houston Texans. Still have major questions, probably on both sides of the ball, but they did really dominate that game against the Buffalo Bills, and they did really control that. Yes, they only won by 3, but if you watch the full game, it looks a bit more convincing than I think the scoreboard would lead you to believe. We will see how the offense adjusts with no Nico Collins, and I was skeptical of the Stephon Diggs acquisition, and given how it ended in Buffalo, but I was like, you know what, if he's number 3, that's fine. I do think that for a few weeks, and he was placed on IR today, so it's going to, or Collins, was placed on IR today, so it's going to be at least 4 weeks. I do think in that time, we will see the real value of this Stephon Diggs signing. Because as much as I like Tank Dell, I don't think he is number 1 receiver. I think he is big play number 2 guy. But I don't think he is that number 1. Diggs has proven it in the past. There are certain things that maybe haven't gone perfectly well for him. But I think that he has at least shown he can be that number 1. He needs to show that again here with the Houston Texans. To really, I think, drive home his kind of value, which would probably create issues down the road where, I'm the number 1 guy now. Look how much it's grown. And then Nico Collins, who is showing he's a top 3 receiver in this league, comes in and it's like, well, actually. At number 5, it's the Detroit Lions. The offense feels back on track. The defense maybe giving up some points at certain times, but the defense has looked a little bit better at different parts as well. I think that game on Monday night against Seattle does enough to drive home that this team, I think, again, the kind of phrasing of the week is they've figured it out. Offensively, I think they figured out how best to spread it around to all of their options. Defensively, there is still a little bit of work to do, but they have at least done a good job of making teams one-dimensional against them because their work against the run has been phenomenal so far this year. And so I think that we have seen enough from Detroit to make you believe that this has grown into a good football team here this season. At 4, Washington, man. Couldn't put them any lower than this. The offense has been elite so far this season. And this isn't to say that it will be for the rest of the year from the conversation we had on Monday about them. But I think that this is for real. I think it is legitimate. And the defense, they have done really well. And this has been a masterclass, I think, in coaching by Dan Quinn, who I was a little skeptical of the hire, but then bringing in Cliff Kingsbury, I think really did allow Quinn to just focus on this defense, and he is getting the absolute most out of this defense, even with a, like I've said before, significant talent deficiency over the course of the season. He's done a great job coaching this team up. At 3, it's Minnesota. Faced a bit of resistance, and maybe Sam Darnold didn't look perfect, but he got the job done. But we really established that this is, again, top 3 defense in the league. Brian Flores, coaching masterclass with this defensive unit. And that was one that we maybe should have saw coming on Sunday morning. It's Brian Flores against Nathaniel Hackett. How did we think that was going to go? Maybe should have saw that one coming a little bit more. But Minnesota, it's all clicking. We'll see about the Aaron Jones injury and Ty Chandler maybe getting an opportunity when he comes back. At 2, it's Baltimore. Yeah, they probably should have lost, but they didn't. That's a real comeback against what we still think is maybe a real team, and they have had some very, very strong performances this year. A couple of questionable ones, but I do think that right now they are playing some very good football. You worry about the defense, for sure you worry about the defense, but Lamar Jackson has elevated from his unbelievable MVP season a year ago. So that makes you feel really good about where they're at. And number 1, we can't knock them off. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They are still the best team in football. The finding ways to win. That Mahomes ridiculous, what was it, 3rd and 8 run where he just kind of bobs and weaves out of traffic and everything like that. Like how? I can't do that on Madden. It was unbelievable what he is able to do. They are doing just enough to win a lot of these games, but this defense is elite right now, and they're not putting up a ton of points to win these games, and they're not blowing anybody out, but they never seem fully out of control of these games, and if it ends up being a loss, it feels a little bit more like, interesting. Like it's almost more like they would run out of time than they would lose, that sort of a thing. So they continue to be number 1 in the NFL power rankings.